Homagyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. It's a good idea when we live close by in a city to always get together to try to discuss the ways and means to elevate consciousness. So taking conscious control of your life. This is a whole genre, actually. And this last week, we've been in many different corporate places talking about the same subject. Today's specific topic is life lessons from nature. And I like this one because it's so readily available. Although I may see things around me, I may just take them for granted. That's always possible. Like even thinking about water itself, we're really lucky in the Bay Area that we have good water and it's readily available. Have you ever noticed that? When's the last time you noticed it? It's the past 2 months, yeah. A little too readily available. I mean, some places don't have water very much. It comes only at intervals and it's not as pristine as it is here. And not just from the natural world, but from any circumstance. One of the definitions of wisdom that I very much appreciate, or of a wise person, is somebody who's able to take a lesson from every circumstance. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, one of the books on bhakti, the speaker recommends that, or says that if one's able to train one's intelligence, then the intelligence itself can become our teacher. And that means taking lessons from various situations that arise in the world. So now, the story of the sage. Now don't be alarmed by the appearance of the sage because he used to be a Sunday school teacher. Mm-hmm. Just kidding. But this is a story that comes up in the Srimad Bhagavatam about the sage with 24 gurus. In Sanskrit, guru means heavy with knowledge, and means a teacher. So this sage was in the wilderness. He lived alone. But one day, by happenstance, a king named Yadu was traveling across the wilderness area that the sage lived in, and Yadu met the sage and began to inquire from him, and realized that he was an enlightened person. And so Yadu, the king, asked, how did you become enlightened? And the sage says, well, I have these gurus all around me. In fact, I have 24 gurus who have instructed me and brought me to the stage of enlightenment. And Yadu looks around and says, well, excuse me, but I don't see anybody. And then the sage begins to talk about his various teachers. And the first one that he brings up is the earth. And from the earth, he learned tolerance and perspective, because although the earth is a nurturer and she continually gives, and although people continually take and very infrequently show gratitude for the gifts that she gives, they more or less take them for granted. Oftentimes, that's the role of a mother. The small child is taking, and not until child turns 33 years old does he or she begin to think about giving anything back. And he saw that this is a noble quality in the earth of tolerance. People digging, people mining, abusing the earth in many different ways, but still, she goes on giving. Then perspective. And in fact, in a separate section of the same literature, Earth is called Bhumi. She's personified as a deity named Bhumi. In fact, you'll find this Bhumi deity if you go to Thailand. They have these, at various intervals around the city, they have Bhumi. And they have days in which they celebrate Bhumi, the earth. Perspective. She talks, does Bhumi, about the kings who come into the world, and then they claim various sections of the earth as their own. And she's laughing at this, saying that although they're here only for a few minutes. They come with such great gusto, and they spill blood on the soil. And not only do they claim the earth, but then they go off into the water, and they claim the sea also. This is mine. And her perspective, you think in geological time, is very much similar to the kind of perspective I've had every year when I'm in India during October, November. And there's a certain type of insect called the Diwali germ. And it starts to gestate in the late afternoon. It's born just as the sun's going down. It has its lifespan, goes to Home Depot. It buys insurance, has offspring, and celebrates its life all the way until a little past midnight, and then it dies. In the evening time, you'll see millions of them. Mostly, I see them congregating around light bulbs, and they take that we've really found something significant here. To me, it's just a light bulb, but to them, they've found the source of everything. And by the morning time, there are millions, if not billions, of Diwali germs all over the ground. Their life cycle is so quick. But to Bhumi, ours is similar. And therefore, she considers it ludicrous that humans come, they claim property, they claim the rights, they struggle, they fight over various properties. But they're just, from her perspective, passing through. So the sage took time to see through her perspective, through Bhumi's perspective. And therefore, he learned to not claim proprietorship over earth or whatever is given as one's quota. Just take it that it's being loaned to me. It's on lease, which is something to consider. If you have a house or apartment, normally you have a lease agreement, right? Mm-hmm. Now, do you have a lease agreement for this body? Somewhere. Maybe it's in the car, in the glove box. Did you sign anything saying that you get a certain amount of time in this life? No. Maybe when you were a baby, they took your footprint and put it on the paper. Maybe not. It's just interesting to consider that I didn't get a lease. I don't have a guarantee. So from Bhumi's perspective, every moment is precious. And it's the essence of insanity to claim that I'm here permanently, or what to speak of claim property, that this is mine. Not to say that we shouldn't do due diligence according to whatever current social structures there are, laws to take care of what it's given to us, but at the same time shouldn't internally consider this is mine and become overly attached to it. So there's a lot to learn from the earth itself, from Bhumi, but these are two main lessons that the sage took just by being observant. So then the next was the tree. And from the tree, the sage learned selfless service. And he found that by adjusting his attitude towards thinking about how to be of service wherever he went, he found that not only was he welcomed, but he didn't have much competition. Because there are not that many people that are always thinking in that way. For instance, when you come into a meeting here at Google in any place, if you walk into the room thinking, how can I be of the most service while I'm here? Then you'll be received differently and perceived differently than if you come in as the one who wants to take over the meeting and dominate everything. I mean, maybe your service will be to take over the meeting and dominate. But the fact is that the attitude of selfless service is in alignment with our higher nature, and that brings happiness. Search and destroy. Did you find the origin?
No, I think somebody's phoning.
So in thinking about the lesson that he learned, selfless service, I was considering what it means to give someone something selflessly. In other words, if you give a gift and it's out of love, it's not out of a consideration of remuneration, tit for tat. I'm going to get something back from this. Can someone perceive the difference? Can you perceive the difference? If someone gives you something just out of a sense of love, without any attachment, or if they're expecting something in return. Have you ever noticed that, the difference, in the subtle difference between the two?
Yeah, it is subtle. Sometimes you don't know. You think there's no strings attached, but then you find out later. There were actually some strings attached.
There were some strings attached. There was some. And then how do you feel?
About it. Not surprised, because I sort of more expect that than the latter. I don't find it that often.
It's pretty rare.
Yeah, it's more rare than common. Yeah.
And this is what the sage found, is that actual selfless service, service for service, not expecting anything, not doing it for self-aggrandizement. But there's a way in which if one does service, even if it's anonymous, no one's watching, but you do the service. How do you feel? Do you feel edified, or is there some noticeable change? So this is one of the ways that he experimented with aligning himself in his attitude and his consciousness, is through this selfless service that he observed from a tree. Because a tree is always giving. It offers shade, it offers fruit, it even after it dies, it's got wood to offer to give shelter, and it goes on giving even after it dies. Its offspring through the seeds, continue to grow and things like that. So he took a lot of inspiration from the tree, and he was thinking how to align myself in selfless service and giving without expectation. And it's something one can experiment with and notice that there's a metaphysical quality to that. Because it's not something you can measure on a material level. It's something that happens internally, and it has to do with intention, which is something I couldn't find an intention meter where you hold it up. But we can sense it, as you pointed out. It's a rare thing, but when you do sense it, it's one of the most powerful forces in the world. Selfless service or giving out of love. So he aligned himself with the tree, and the lesson he learned from the tree in that mood of giving service without expectation of return. The next lesson he learned was from the hawk. And one day when he was sitting in his meditation, he heard a fracas. And there was a hawk just alighting from a tree with a mouse. As you see here, this may be the actual picture from when he was watching, all those thousands of years ago. And then two larger hawks assailed this smaller Karari hawk and wanted to kill him for the mouse. And what happened next was, what do you think happened next? The smaller hawk dropped the mouse. So the lesson here is drop the mouse. If you face an intractable situation that's obviously a threat to your well-being, and it seems providential. In other words, it's not. It came of its own accord. It came out of nowhere practically, and it's not going anywhere. Drop it. And when you do, then the world opens up to you. So the smaller hawk noticed that he was being assailed and he was threatened. He just dropped the mouse and flew away. And the sage, while observing this, felt a sudden freedom And he thought about all the ways in which he was holding on to things, and then how that kept him in the grasp of death and of worry and anxiety and so forth. And just by the activity of the Karari hawk, he learned this principle to let go. And this can be such a simple gesture, but suddenly then the whole world opens up to you, and there are many possibilities besides just entering into an intractable situation or a fight over something that you don't need to hold on to. Again, there may be situations in which you do need to fight for a particular thing, but choosing one's battles carefully and seeing what's a mouse, what can be let go. So it's a mantra I keep in my head, drop the mouse, because if you notice, it's not worth being torn apart for. Those are 3 lessons so far. Should I keep going? Or would you have any reflections that spontaneously are jumping out of you right now that you would like to make before I go to the next lesson? And that includes anyone online as well. Yes, please go ahead. Who was about to speak?
I always have a question. So I'm curious, does it matter if someone is doing selfless service for their own happiness? Is it selfless service?
Well, the idea given in the yoga text is that our happiness comes through proper alignment. When we're out of alignment, then we get what's called dukh, which means unhappiness, which means to be out of alignment. So it's quite natural to be in alignment. And when we're in alignment, then our nature is that we're happy. And so it's not unreasonable to want to be happy. It's actually the purpose of life, according to the yoga texts. We're supposed to be happy. And when we're not, when the light goes off on the dashboard warning us of something, it means you got to adjust something.
Distinct from pleasure.
Yeah.
Happiness.
Distinct from, pleasure that is, the distinction is made in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says that an observant person will see that there are pleasures that are out of alignment with our nature. And they're pleasure in name only, he says, because they have a beginning and an end. And actually they cause more suffering in the long run. You know, there are certain kinds of things that I aspire for, and once I get them, they become more of a burden. And so learning where the source of actual happiness is from is one of the tenets of philosophy itself. What to speak of yoga, which yoga actually means to realign, to reconnect, with our actual nature. There was a book, I actually met the author. She gave a talk, and the book was called Happy for No Reason. And I haven't read the book yet, but I like the title so much because it describes alignment. When one's aligned in yoga, then one's happy for no reason. Why are you happy? Well, that's my constitutional nature. And to be aligned through selfless service means to be aligned in our constitutional nature. This is what the theory behind bhakti yoga means, to perform selfless service. See how it feels. Even Dale Carnegie wrote in his book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, that if you're in an anxiety-producing situation, think about how to do good for others. And it takes you out of the small world of your mind into a much larger universe where you actually are in abundance. When you think of service, and then it's an abundant world, because service is abundantly available everywhere. And according to the Srimad Bhagavatam, one of the Bhakti Yoga texts, you can only be happy if you're aligned through selfless service. Any other reflections that are spontaneously springing out of your minds and hearts? Reflection doesn't have to be.
I have a question.
Yes, please. Yes.
So to me, this letting go is not clear. I can understand how, bringing happiness or peace to myself, I should aim to. Sorry, I'm hearing a lot of echo.
Sorry.
How I should aim to let go of my desires. But in this example where the hawk is being chased by bigger hawks, he lets go of the prey that he has. How do I correlate that to real life situation for somebody like us? I'm
Well,
not able to grasp that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying or bringing it up for clarification. Have you ever been in a situation that was intractable and it was very difficult to get out of or to solve?
Yeah, definitely.
So these things happen. And I was thinking yesterday in the corporate setting, I was impressed when Steve Jobs gave a commencement speech at Stanford, and he talked about how he started the Apple Corporation. And it was really his company, he and Steve Wozniak, and they developed it. And then to expand it, they hired a CEO, Scully, and he came in and he fired Steve Jobs. And he was just out. And then he described, did Steve Jobs, that after being fired, of course he said it was the worst day of his life. He thought he had lost everything. But then realizing it was an intractable situation, he said he just let it go. And then as soon as he let it go, all the creative energies that had led to starting the corporation in the first place started to flow through his mental system. That's when he came up with Pixel, which at the time was even bigger than Apple. And so what he was noting was at the times when you actually do let go, don't try to hang on to any particular situation if it becomes intractable, then it frees you up to actually be creative and to move forward. So there may be situations that are that seem providential, and it's always a conundrum. It's one of the great conundrums of life. When do I let go, and when do I keep fighting? But the lesson he learned was to be very observant and to see, first of all, which things are worth fighting for, and which things I should let go. And there are ways of putting more emphasis on certain things and not on others. But if one practices this principle, just with small things, you'll notice that it puts one in abundance. Because as soon as you give something up, for instance, if you let things go that have simply become a burden, but you're attached to them, you'll notice that you live through it. It's one of the things you notice, and that actually there are many other solutions, and there are many other options that one can pursue. It's not just one thing.
Well, I can think of here at Google, there's change happens all the time. When, and I feel like, things have to get divided up quite often, And of course, it's always like, oh, I'm getting the short end of the stick here, It's not being divided up equally, And why is this person getting so much more of what I want than what I'm getting, And so, but what I find is that when I just let that go, oftentimes what I think is more or less is actually not accurate. That I'm actually ending up with way better stuff than what I thought I was losing. Right? So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah. Thank you for bringing in a real life kind of experience. And we did talk about forgiveness in one of the sessions that we had. It is kind of related. Forgiveness is a kind of letting go internally. We may do our due diligence externally, but internally we let go because we realize that we can't control everything. And also, for instance, if somebody offends you, then you have a choice. you can hold on to it and develop a grudge, or you can let it go. And forgiveness is actually a power that's developed. To be able to forgive is an extremely valuable asset to have, because it means that things don't stick to you all the time. And this is related to the hawk, not holding on. And even just with material items, we've talked about this previously, the concept of atyahara. So ahara means actually to eat, or it means to collect. So atyahara means extreme. So atyahara is one of the principles of yoga. Don't hold on to a lot of things that you don't need. Because we have things in our physical environment, I dare say, that we hold on to even though we don't need them. And they actually clutter up our life and hold us back. If you're trying to escape a tiger and you're running across the river and you're holding on to a box full of gold, which will you abandon the gold and swim, or you try to outrun the tiger carrying the gold? This is the kind of framing that the yogis put up, death is the tiger and we're trying to get away. Yes?
I think your Steve Jobs example is also really great as well, because it's so often that what I think is good is bad, and what I think is bad is good. And, I see this quite often. I recently had a friend who lost his job, and he came to me really down about it. And I said, this could be a blessing in disguise. You don't know if this is good or bad. And it turned out, actually, it was like the best thing that ever happened to him, because he landed this other job that was so much better. And so I think another aspect of this is that judgment that I constantly have on every situation. And it's wrong often. My judgments are often wrong, and because I'm holding on to what I think, like this shouldn't be happening this way, because it's not what I planned.
Yeah.
My plan was to keep my job and
Right.
in Apple and make it, but actually that wasn't the right plan. The right plan was he got pulled out for however long a period, and then he came back, and now look, it was like, it's way better probably than if he'd always stayed at Apple. You know what I mean? Maybe Apple we wouldn't have iPhones. Who knows? So you just, you know what I'm saying? Like you just can't.
I
really
do.
know what's
Yeah,
going
there's a
on.
whole movie called It's a Wonderful Life, all about this.
Yeah.
But we can't see from that perspective. And in fact, going back to the talk I referred to Steve Jobs, he gave 3 instances in his life. That was one of them that he said were the most important incidents in his life, and all of them were about losing something. In fact, the last one, he lived 10 years past the time when he was diagnosed with an incurable kind of disease. But he thought he had an incurable disease that by which he was going to live only a few more months for 24 hours. They gave him the diagnosis and they said, you have to get your affairs in order because you're finished. Then he came back the next day and they said, actually, it's slightly different than we thought. You can live for longer. And he said in the time that that happened, that time period, and afterwards, he learned the greatest lesson of all, that I can't hold on to life at all, what to speak of all the little circumstances that come up and all the little changes. So learning, just remembering when I'm suffering because I'm holding on to something, you have an option to let it go. There'll be other mice that will come right along.
Better mice.
More and better mice to come. So drop the mouse. Now, the crane, I deeply appreciate, and I was just in a place overseas where I was watching cranes, and they'd stand perfectly still and stare into the water. So from the crane, the sage learned focus. And focus is one of the greatest assets that we can develop. And again, it's a rare asset because there are so many distractions. And patience, because he would wait for the right fish to come and stay in a prepared state of mind for the right thing to come along. And that's why he would prioritize. So from the crane, he learned focus, patience, and how to prioritize things. And this is something that can be practiced, and is in the discipline of yoga is a highly valued quality is focus. So there's a practice called focused attention training, which means, you can remember, FAT, fat. That focused attention means the ability to direct your attention, to become aware when your mind has wandered, to redirect your focus, and to be aware of your awareness, which actually means to be aware. So these four principles are something that one can practice on a regular basis and develop. And so through the process of introspection and meditation, one can do this. Let's see what time it is. We have a little bit of time for a kind of a guided meditation in which we can practice focusing our attention. I don't see anybody with a sour look on their face, so I'll take that as a let's try it.
Battery 90%. Connected to iPhone.
Okay, so please find
To iPhone.
a comfortable way to sit. And if you sit up a little straighter than you were before, then it brings your mind to attention. Now close your eyes and prepare to look inwardly. Release yourself from all your responsibilities and bring your attention to your breathing. On the inward breaths, mentally say in. And on the exhalations, say out. To observe your breath even in a more profound way, see each breath as a gift. You're now walking on a soft golden brown pathway with a tangle of green trees and flowers on either side. At the end of the pathway is a yellow door. As you push the door open, you are greeted by an expanse of soothing light. The light envelops you, and you feel warm and safe. You've entered your inner world, the place in which you can taste the nectar of your own consciousness. Close the door to the outside world and be fully present. Remain unattached to any thoughts. Observe your thoughts, but don't engage them. You are a dispassionate witness with no need or responsibility to react. Now come back to your breath, and then relax your feet. Relax your legs. Relax your abdomen, your chest, back. Let go of your shoulders. Relax the neck. And finally, relax the muscles in your face and head. And breathe. Feel positively that you exist. One by one, observe your hands, your legs, your head, your hair. Notice that you are the one looking at them, but you are not them. You're separate from the things you see. The seer and the seen are different. Feel that you are not the body. See your thoughts and feel that you are not your thoughts. Now please remain in this space and listen to a sacred text from the Bhagavad Gita and meditate on this text. The sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it is all-pervading. Similarly, the spiritual essence situated in transcendental vision does not mix with the body, though situated in that body. Before leaving this space, remember that your point of power is always in the present moment. Now step outside the door and greet your life situation. Remember that your life and your life situation are different. You can rub your palms together. Hold your palms in front of your face and then open your eyes. Come back into the room. And we'll just take a few reflections. If you had any experience or anything noteworthy you wanted to report. Go ahead, Priya.
So, when you spoke about how observe that you're seeing your hair, your face, your body, realizing that it was a stark realization to notice that we torment ourselves, our true selves, with our life situation, and just this body, which is essentially made of these few elements and the mind and intelligence, and we allow ourselves so much to be controlled while we actually do have this ability to separate ourselves from this concept of a life situation. And then you describe to like step outside and then realize that you're just set apart from this energy, and that was very practical and powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was very helpful. Yes.
The idea that we separate, means we identify so much with the thoughts, and that keeps on keeping us bounded with emotions, with different things. Just separating ourselves from our thought that these are just thoughts gives you a totally different perspective and relaxes you.
Yes. You'd be more effective dealing with your life situation when you realize that you're separate from your life situation. because you'll be less reactive and more thoughtful about what's actually taking place. One of the ways of putting it is you don't take things personally. There's a book called The Four Agreements, and in it the author recommends one of the disciplines in life: don't take things personally. And if you're able to find this space where you realize that you're the witness of what's going on, but it's not you, then even when you're assailed or insulted or something like that, you'll be able to develop this ability to not take it personally. And it's a very powerful ability to have, to develop. Here are a few more thoughts coming up on the PowerPoint. That focus is nectar, distraction is torture. My own words. I think of it like that. Whenever I'm able to actually be in the moment, and I mentioned in the guided meditation that the point of power is always in the present moment. And if I'm able to reside there and deal with the task at hand, then I'll actually feel aligned, because I'm always in the present moment. Remembering that the point of power is always in the present moment, and the second question to ask is, what's the most valuable use of my time right now? That's a question that one can ask oneself to prioritize, just like the crane prioritized. Another is the definition of concentration, the ability to focus the attention on a single thought, subject, or object while ignoring distractions is your greatest asset. Actually, that's not the definition, but that's a declaration made by me, I think. So Yoga Wisdom 1, a few takeaways of the Yoga Wisdom. Develop your attention span, as it's something that can be worked on. And through the practice of introspection and even exercises like we went through now, even having a molecule of experience each day, or whatever interval you can afford, will help you to develop your attention span. The Yoga Sutras talks about different levels of concentration. If you're able to stay focused on one object for 7 seconds, this is considered to be a Herculean task, because our minds are very subtle, and when they're not trained, they tend to dart from one place to the next. And as I said earlier, focus is nectar, distraction is torture. So it's something that you can recover from, a broken mind, or a mind that is tortured. And it's something that's come up a lot nowadays, because people often get distracted by looking at smartphones, and it can become addictive. But if you think about the whole world as one big smartphone, and everything you look at is like a big smartphone screen, it's possible just to go from one thing to the next and never be able to experience the nectar of your own consciousness and awareness, and to think in terms of, I am the witness, I'm watching what's going on, and not become overwrought by your involvement in your life situation. Focus mode, there's a lot of studies on this about learning. When you're in focus mode, you get your greatest learning abilities and achievements, because that is where you're actually perceiving at the highest level. And one of my favorite quotes, this actually comes from Louis Pasteur, is that great discoveries come only unto the prepared mind. So taking time to prepare your mind through this process of introspection, meditation, prepares it to see opportunities and to see creative circumstances. I found this quote, I thought it included, because I really think it goes to the point. The two most powerful warriors are patience and time. It has to do with being able to prioritize and, like the crane, focus and take your time. That crane would sit there focused on the water in one point, not move until the right fish came along, and then boom. So similarly, when we're patient enough and we take the time, and know what we want, then we'll be able to take advantage of it. Stephen Wright, a stand-up comedian, I think he's retired now, but one of his jokes that I always took with me, you can't have everything, where would you put it? And Stephen Covey, don't major in minor things. Another one from him, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Everyone say it, it's a nice mantra. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And then the final lesson he learned from the musk deer. This is our old friend the musk deer. You've heard me talk about him before. But it's such an interesting case that, of course, it's a mythical story, but it describes our existential situation. The musk deer emits a beautiful scent, which is musk. It comes from a gland in its navel. But, as the saying goes, or the story, the musk deer is looking everywhere in the world to find the source of that scent, and doesn't know that it's emanating from its own navel. So in a similar way, I'm looking for a satisfaction in various places, externally, not knowing that the source of that satisfaction is my own consciousness. When I become aware that I'm a non-material entity, and I can reside in that, even for a moment at a time, I'll experience a kind of happiness that is unparalleled from interacting with the external world. And that's the greatest gift that one can give oneself. So Yoga Wisdom 2, get ready for a cliche, but it's very applicable. Happiness comes from within. But how to actually to tap into that is the perennial question. The Bhagavad Gita says that if you practice, you'll be able to make your mind like a lamp in a windless place. It doesn't become disturbed so easily. Yoga Wisdom 2, this is from the 4 from the Yoga Sutras. Yoga is the stilling of the changing states of the mind. And then the next one, which is the follow-up to this, says that when that is accomplished, a seer abides in his own true nature. And that true nature is called prasanna, which means you're happy for no reason. So this is the first symptom that you're contacting the spiritual consciousness beyond the changing states of the mind, which is that you feel happy. You feel that you're living in the flow of abundance, and that there's nothing more to be gained. So look inside yourself for real happiness. So as a summary, our friend, the sage, he had 24 gurus. We just looked at a few today: the earth, the tree, the hawk, the crane, and the musk deer. And we have a couple more minutes for any last reflections or questions.
I like your photos. They're
Pardon
very
me?
relevant. Your photos.
You like the photos?
Your reflections. It's got a reflection.
Kay Shraddha. She picked them all out. She's at the very end down there.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's about time.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about Earth and animals, and there's this cycle of life and death, and so when you're in that cycle, when you're alive, time is limited. How much importance should we put on time? It seems to be super important, but then it's also sort of becomes a problem as well to be overly focused on time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you were talking about take your time. Well, I don't want to take my time because could be wasting my time. So.
Well, that's one of the principles that's mentioned in the yoga scriptures, is that a person who realizes the opportunity that he or she has in the human experience doesn't waste time on things that he or she knows will not be beneficial. Of course, even in the Gita, Krishna says you should be balanced. There needs to be time. He said, don't eat too much, don't eat too little, don't sleep too much, and don't sleep too little. And also don't recreate too much, but don't recreate too little. So there's a way in which, we have a psychophysiological nature. And to some degree, we have to attend to that, because it's not that we can just buck the system and say that now I'm going to be a yogi and move to the forest, because we won't be able to tolerate it. We have to accommodate whatever physical, psychological nature we have to be able to take the most advantage of the practice of conscious living. And that's given in a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam that says, Kamasya nindriya pritir labo jivete yavata jivasya tattva jignasya narto yasheha karmavi, which means don't waste your time with base sense gratification, but eat to live, don't live to eat. And then it says that the purpose of living, the purpose of nourishing yourself and remaining balanced and strong in your life, healthy, is so that you have more power to inquire and to actually learn the lessons of life. So it is a strange situation that we're in right now, because according to the yoga scriptures, we are categorically different from the energy we're interacting with. And therefore, it causes this kind of bidimensional reality for us. That on one side, we do have to attend to certain things, even socially. As I mentioned before, you go for a job, which you're going to have even as a yogi, because you've got to have a place to live. And if you go to the interview and they ask you, who are you? And you say, I'm a non-material being. I'm a spiritual soul. I have nothing to do with this world. I'll say, okay. You don't get the job. You have to balance on both levels. So time is something that is the most valuable asset. In fact, it's said that it is our most valuable asset, because money you can get more of. You can lose $1 million and then somehow or other get it back if you want. But time, if you lose 1 second, you can't buy it back. It's so valuable. So it's one of the symptoms of somebody who's fully aware of the opportunity is not wasting it. That may have been a lengthy answer, but I thought it was necessary to try to balance the two sides. So we took a few lessons. One of the main ones was that if you train your intelligence, you'll become a wise person by taking the lesson in every situation, and also from the things that you see. Don't just become overwhelmed by what happens to you in life, but see it as a chance to grow. And don't be afraid of the circumstances. There are ways in which we can let go of things. There are ways in which we can wait for the next thing, or we can live in preparation mode if we're not in the situation we want to be now. And if all else fails, and it will, look inwardly and find your really steady situation where you can taste nectar from observing your own consciousness, and also, as we do in another meditation session, observing that there's a kind of a super consciousness that's above us, that's supplying us intelligence, that's guiding us, and so forth. And this is what the Yoga Sutras called Ishvara Pranidhan, coming to the point of realizing that there's a source to our life which is benevolent and which is guiding us. And this is one of the next stages of meditation. And when one becomes aware of that, one is, according to Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutras, one has entered into or actually, if you're able to go to that position more rapidly, you can bypass a lot of the other stages, because it's on the higher level. It's so nice to come back and see friendly and familiar faces, and thank you for giving your attention. I know you're all busy and you have very important things to do, so it's really touching that you come here, and I look forward to seeing you next month, because I'll be back in town in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who joined us online for checking in. To be
Nateri armarman, nateri armarman, nateri armarman, nateri armarman, hey, nateri armarman, nateri armarman, nateri armarman, nateri armarman.